this conference on China and the sea. I'm here representing the Skarphol Institute of Marine Science, which is a research facility of the Faculty of Science at the University of Hong Kong. And so I've got a very, if you like, natural science and physical science outlook. At SWIMS, we have a number of scientists who are working on coastal ecosystems from a very biological and a very physical sciences approach, looking at coastal ecosystems. And so I think that that's something which we bring to this diverse group, which is going to be speaking here today and tomorrow, of course. The other thing I think is that we are bringing together a group of people who have got interest in this common body, which is the sea or the ocean, depending on what scale we're talking about. At SWIMS, one of our major missions that brings together all our researchers is that we have a drive to understand the multiple impacts which are facing our coastal ecosystems. And we want to use that understanding to try and develop ways that we can maintain the integrity and indeed the sustainability of the seas for the future. And as we're all aware, that's a major task, and it's the reason why we're all sitting here in this room today. I think there's another reason why we all happen to be here today, is that we're in Hong Kong. And as you know, Hong Kong is one of the largest urban environments in the world. We sit in the world's probably biggest megalopolis in South China. And so, of course, the coastal ecosystems which we see here are facing probably more intense pressures than many other places in the world. And if we extend that viewpoint a little further, going up into China with the special economic zones developed along the coast, Shanghai, Qingdao, Xiamen, then this problem is one which extends all along the South China coastline. And I think it's something which really does focus what we should be doing in this region to think about it. At SWIMS, we kind of see ourselves as being, if you like, a crystal ball. Hong Kong is almost a crystal ball to what many coastal cities around the world will actually become in the future. We've probably gone a lot further down that line of degradation and destroying the environment. And what we're trying to do now is try and find out how we can actually manage that in a more sustainable way. Maybe what we learn here can be applied to other different places. Despite the fact that we have this huge anthropogenic pressures, we also have still a lot to protect. Hong Kong has 25% of the biodiversity in terms of numbers of species that we find in China. That's 25% of the whole of the China coastline, which has, Hong Kong's coastline is less than 1% of that of China. And so we still have an incredibly rich biodiversity which we need to try and protect and conserve. It's not just biodiversity though. As we all know, one of the reasons why these cities have developed is that they rely on their maritime infrastructure. They rely on the maritime area for ports and harbours, but also natural resources as well. And the theme of the conference, as we all know, is trying to look at how we can work towards sustainability. Sustainability, though, won't just come from, for example, marine scientists, natural scientists. It needs a variety of different multidisciplinary inputs. And I think this is where the real strength of this conference actually is housed in the fact that it's brought together a huge diversity of people from different backgrounds. Economists, managers, social scientists, biologists, physical scientists, and of course interested general public and green groups. And so I'm very hopeful that we can all contribute our small part from this conference to try and build towards thinking about how we tackle this issue. Whether you have the ocean, which of course is an open resource, but how do we manage it, or how do we try and maintain its integrity and its sustainability? I'd like to finally end by thanking the French Consulate of Hong Kong and Macau for being able to work to pull this together. And I'd also especially like to thank Christelle, who's done a lot of work to pull this together as well. SWIMS is very pleased to be part of that. Hong Kong U is very pleased to be part of that. And I'd like to welcome you all here on behalf of Hong Kong U and SWIMS and look forward to the next 2 days. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to now turn to the French Consul, who will be introducing on behalf of their organisation. So thank you. Next stage.
Dear Greg, dear Sebastian, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today to open this international symposium on the development of the maritime economy in China and the challenge of the sustainability of the sea and oceans. As you may know, this environmental issue is a key consideration for France. And 1 year ago, French President, recently elected, Emmanuel Macron, launched the world appeal for Make Our Planet Great Again. And last month, the Minister of Environment, Mr. Nicolas Hulot, announced a national plan to protect biodiversity. Tomorrow, the 8th of June, will be the 25th World Ocean Day. And this special day has been unofficially celebrated since its original proposal in 1992 at the United Nations, the Earth Summit on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. And this day is an annual reminder to honor, protect and conserve the world oceans and its resources, with a global aim to raise awareness among the general public about the crucial role of the ocean plays in our lives and the way people can act for a more sustainable future. Why is preserving the ocean so important? Well, it's because the important provides us with many resources and services, including 70% of our oxygen, but also climate regulation, food resources, and more. The Conservation Action Team in 2018 of the World Ocean Day is Clean Ocean, mainly for preventing marine litter and plastic pollution and encouraging solutions for healthy and sustainable oceans. In this way, let me remind you some terrible facts. Each year, 400 million tons of plastic are produced. Half of them are single-use only. More than 8 million tons of them enter the oceans. And at this rate, experts think that by 2050, the amount of plastic in the ocean will weigh more than the amount of fish in the sea, which is one of the reasons why plastic has become today a major issue. Plastics and their byproducts can litter the ocean, cities and waterways, and they are not biodegradable. It can hang around in the environment for hundreds of years. This is not only an issue for the environment and marine biodiversity, but it's also a problem for hygiene and health for humans and animals. And every year, 100,000 of animals in the sea are killed by plastic, mainly seabirds, but also fish or shellfish. The French community in Hong Kong is very active and committed on preventing plastic pollution. Several initiatives have been organized this year, such as the beach cleaning in last March, where more than 550 volunteers gathered to pick up 7,600 plastic bottles and straws. We had also the Green and Sustainable Week, organized by the French International School, and we had the pleasure to welcome the Tara Schooner for its Hong Kong call dedicated to the study of coral reefs in the Pacific Ocean, and this mission is of course very much involved in preserving our seas. The United Nations is currently holding a summit in New York since yesterday until the 9th of June, calling for a sustainable conservation of and exploitation of seas and oceans. And here in Hong Kong, the French Center for Research on Contemporary China, in collaboration with the SWIMS and the French Consulate, is organizing this symposium. This is a tough competition within the United Nations. Across the world, humans have created dramatic change upon the seas. One thing is certain, our current course is unsustainable. Yet the oceans remain a vital resource with the potential to generate enormous economic growth. Balancing human activity, such as fisheries, maritime transportation, and so on, with the long-term health of the ocean is therefore essential. I wish you a very fruitful conference. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ray and Eric, for your welcoming words about this international symposium. I'm Sébastien Collin, geographer and researcher at the French Center for Research on Contemporary China, which has been established in Hong Kong in 1991 and which is a research center specialized on social sciences and contemporary China, and also Hong Kong and Taiwan. As the initiator and one of the co-organizers of this symposium, it's really a great pleasure for me to say some words in this opening ceremony. Firstly, because the opening ceremony logically means that the project has been concretized in due time, which is a first victory and a satisfaction. Secondly, because we will have during these 2 days, at the moment of the World Ocean Day, as Eric Berti reminded in his speech, several presentations and discussion on important topics, as Gray reminded in his speech. That's to say the sea and ocean sustainability in the specific context of the development of China's maritime economy. At the CEFC, I'm working on China's maritime policy. That's why I decided to initiate this project in collaboration with the French Consulate and the SWIPs of HKU. China's maritime policy and the wish of Chinese authorities to make their country a big maritime power are, of course, not only limited to the projection of PLNAV in the South China Sea or beyond the island chains, but this objective to make China as a maritime power includes also the development of maritime economy, which means the development of all economic activities related to the sea: fisheries, maritime transport, cruise tourism, and so on. Some of those activities are booming, like the cruise tourism, for example, or maritime transport, especially in the context of the building of the 21st century maritime Silk Road, which is a very important driver of the maritime transport development in China. Some of those activities need to be reformed, like fisheries. We will have a lot of presentations about fisheries during the symposium, about public policies, but also management of fisheries resources. All of those activities have strong impact on marine ecosystem and threaten the sea and ocean sustainability. Globally, but also at the scale of China seas. One of the important questions is how the notion of sustainability is or can be integrated in those various kinds of economic activities. And in their objective to present China as a responsible power in the environmental field, Chinese authorities also try to take some measures and public policies focusing on environmental protection and sustainable management of resources. It's important also to have a look and to try to analyze the implementation of this kind of policies and measures. In this context, this symposium will try to give a view, certainly not perfect, and of course not comprehensive, on this complex relation between China's maritime economy and sea and ocean sustainability. Today, after the keynote speech of Daniel Poli, we will have 2 sessions. which focus on some sector of the maritime economy, especially fisheries, maritime transport, cruise tourism, ports, and more widely, the development of coastal infrastructures. Tomorrow, 2 other sessions will address the management of marine ecosystem and fishery resources, as well as the problem of the illegal fishing. Especially, for the most part of presentations, on the basis of case studies in the coastal waters of Hong Kong, Guangdong province, and also in the East China Sea and in the Yellow Sea. It was very important as a geographer to have some case studies and localized example for analyzing better these relations between maritime economy and sustainability. Finally, we will have an interesting comparative analysis between European Union and China in terms of fight against illegal fishing. We will have, thanks to the presence of my colleague from France, Michel Morin, 2 presentations where the European Union will be addressed, and it will be also interesting to have some comparison elements between Europe and China in terms of fisheries policy. Before giving the floor to Daniel Poli for his keynote speech, as the tradition, I would like to thank all supporters and organizers of this symposium. It was a great pleasure for me to implement and concretize this project those last months. I would like to thank the Institut Français, the CNRS, the French National Center of Research and Science, the Hong Kong Maritime Museum, the Consulate General of France, its Consul General, Eric Berti, its Service of Culture, Education and Science, especially Benoît Etienne and Frédéric Petard, and Justine Pont. Frédéric and Justine supported me a lot for the organization of this event. I would like also address my thanks to the SWIMS, to Gray Williams and Christelle Knott, and also Sylvia Yu, who helped for the finalization of the organization here in Hong Kong, U. And of course, I would like to thank my research center, the CLC, its director, Mr. Eric Florence, and our office manager, Mr. Henry Wu. I would like to thank all speakers of this symposium for accepting my invitation. We have speakers from France, Canada, Singapore, and mainland China, and also some speakers from Hong Kong. I would like also to thank the audience, you, for your presence, and I hope that you will enjoy this symposium, and I hope this symposium will be very fruitful in terms of analysis and discussion of this very important issue. Thank you very much. So we are a little bit in advance for the keynote speech because we plan to begin the keynote speech at 9:45, but I think it's good because we just can take a few minutes for making a small break, and we will begin maybe around 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. Thank you. plan to make a photo with all speakers, so I think it's a good time to do it before the keynote speech. So I invite all speakers to come. I'm pleased and honored to introduce Mr. Daniel Poli, who will give the keynote speech on the global challenge of sea and ocean sustainability. Daniel Poli is a renowned researcher in his field. He became in 1994 professor at the Fisheries Center, now the Institute for the Oceans and Fisheries of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. He was the director of this institute from 2003 to 2008. Since 1999, he is also principal investigator of the Sea Around Us project, devoted to studying, documenting and mitigating the impact of industrial fishing, including China's, on the world's marine ecosystems. Daniel Poli is the author of plenty of papers, over 1,000 heavily cited publications. He developed some concepts, methods, and software which used by a lot of researchers of his field. Finally, I just mentioned also that Daniel Poli received the Légion d'honneur in France in 2017. Daniel, the floor is yours.
So, hello. I'm back. I've been here in Hong Kong from January to April, and I came back for this event, which I'm very happy to participate in. And I will talk about the ocean at first, generally, and our interaction with them, and then I will focus a little bit on China. And I will start with nature. This is, we all like to be in that, we scientists all like to be in that journal. And I was consulted one time and by one of the journalists, and they asked, why do you need catches, the catch of fisheries? And I wrote, there are good reasons why we need to know the catch of fisheries. And I didn't know that I was going to be involved in a debate about catches are useful, but not for stock assessment, for evaluating fisheries, because this is a specialty of population dynamics experts. But actually we need catches for all kinds of things. We require data on catches because actually fishing itself is the most important way we interact with nature, and the size of the catches measures the size of these interactions. And then the amount of catch times the ex-vessel price is telling us how much fisheries are worth. And if you count also the value chain products that follow the catches about the value of the fisheries times 3 approximately, if you include the value chains all the way to the restaurant. This indicates the contribution of fisheries to GDP. So you need catches for that. And also, if you want to evaluate the extent of criminal or fraudulent activity of fleets operating without license or access agreement, you need catches. Indeed, one can argue that you don't know anything about fisheries if you don't know the catch. And for this, in order to know the catch, you need accurate statistics. And scientists that work in their country or in their region usually have direct access to local catches, even access to the fishes themselves. So they will have information on catch, and obtaining a proper idea of the fishery is not difficult. But as soon as you work internationally, you need catches from statistics from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, because you cannot do field work in lots of countries, and you cannot estimate by yourself the catch of Indonesia, or the catch of China, or the catch even of Hong Kong. Now, I have for years used the FAO catches like everybody else, but the FAO has FAO catches underestimate the catch in many, many countries. That gradually I realized that FAO really strongly underestimates the catch of most countries and overestimates the catch of a few countries. And that's China, Vietnam, and a few others, where the political pressure on the statistical system is for increased catch. So we have underestimated catches in most countries of the world and overestimates of catches where the government wants to make a good impression. So if for the underestimation, it is a matter of compensating, of adding catches that are not reported. Usually, the countries that are members of FAO, all countries, report the catch of industrial fisheries, of big fisheries, usually. And usually the catch of small-scale fisheries are not reported. And it's a vicious circle, because the small-scale fisheries are small, people think they are not important, and they don't report on it, so they're even smaller, and then people have the impression that but actually you can get out of this, and you can estimate the catch of a fishery that you don't know about, because fishing is a social activity. You cannot fish without being observed. You cannot fish without producing a fish that a restaurant will use or people will consume. So you can always infer the catch from indirectly. For example, in the South Pacific, for many islands, we have inferred the catch of reef fishes from the consumption data, fish consumption data that was provided by the World Health Organization that does interviews in these countries. And when fisheries exist and FAO doesn't give catches, any estimate of catches is better than zero, which is precisely zero, even an uncertain estimate. And the reconstruction of catch that starts with using the reported catch data. This is like a puzzle. You start with the corners, and you start with the edges, and then you put all information that you have in from different sources. I mentioned the WHO, the World Health Organization, but you can have studies by anthropologists, field studies, You can have gender studies that are studying the fishing by women on reefs. You can have all kind of indirect information. And one example, and then the picture that you get at the end is the reconstructed data. It's a reported catch plus the unreported catch. An example in the Bahamas. The Bahamas is a little country of islands east of Florida. Now, the government of the Bahamas reports about 10,000 tons of fish, lobsters mainly, per year. But in reality, they catch 2.5 times that much. And we inferred that, or rather a Bahamian student who worked with us went to the different hotels and they asked the millions of visitors that you get, where do you get the fish that you sell them? Because they eat fish in the different hotels. And she identified then the suppliers of these hotels, and these are all fishers who sell their catch directly to the hotels. And she could infer then a huge proportion of fish that were sold without the government channels the government being aware of it. And also this big gray mass there is sport fishers from the US that come to fish, and they have a bag limit, an amount of fish that they can catch, and the number of them is known. So if you multiply the amount of fish that they can catch, and they will catch it, by the number that comes, then you get. The sports fishing is, in many countries, bigger than the commercial fishing. So that is the catch of the country and not the 10,000 tons. And in West Africa, from Morocco to Namibia, the FAO, if you look at the FAO data, the domestic catch is about 2 times the reported catch. That's domestic catch. So in these 22 countries, the domestic catch is underestimated. Only half of the catch is reported. The discards, the fish that is thrown overboard is not reported. The subsistence fishing, that is very important for direct consumption, is not reported. Recreational fishing, there is recreational fishing, is not reported. And this also doesn't, the domestic catch, that is only domestic catch. In fact, the domestic catch that is reported is only 1/4. In reality, a huge amount of fish is taken by foreign fleet and reported elsewhere. And thus, a consultant or a researcher working on FAO data would assume that 1/4 of the catch is made in West Africa, but in fact, a huge amount of fish is caught legally and illegally, mainly by Spain and France and Russia and others, and now China in West Africa. And they wouldn't know that because FAO doesn't indicate that this catch has been taken in these countries. So that's for underestimation. For overestimation, that's a different story. This is more difficult to deal with overestimation. And in the case of China, FAO at the beginning of the 2000 asked us to look at what is wrong with the catch statistics from China, which were growing exponentially. And we wrote a report, the marine fisheries of China, consisting of 2 parts. One that I will mention afterward, and another one where when we look at the literature about incentive for over-reporting. And socialist countries, and the Soviet Union was similar in that regard, have incentive to over-report, or rather the functionaries, the people who work in the government, for the government, have incentive to over-report, because they promote it on the basis of the industry that they work in. So if somebody is in charge of a district and or branch of the economy and reports great advances in that sector, they will be promoted, or this industry will receive subsidies, and so there is a strong incentive to do that. There is a huge literature about that, about this phenomenon. And recently, I was in China. There was another article in the press, the Chinese press, about 2 provinces over-reporting their GDP by about half. They over-reported their GDP, and this had to be corrected. This occurs again and again and again in the People's Republic of China, that the statistics are not reliable. And so this literature, much of it was in English, I was able to look at, and the Chinese national helped us with this. And another component was looking at the catch statistics in geographic terms. And that part was written for an article in Nature, which caused a gigantic fuss, which caused a big problem. Not for me, but it caused a big issue. Basically, we plotted the catch over the world. I will show you in a minute how we do that, but we plotted the catch over the world, and we look at where there was an anomaly, where they had too much catch. And China had the biggest deviation from a model that we had generally in the model with 30 variables that predicted the catch over all of the whole world, given 30 variables like depth, primary production of the sea. China, can you, it's a dangerous thing. China you see this going up, that was the official statistics. This thing going up like this. And then the central government thought it was too much and declared that the growth would be in quality, not anymore in quantity, and it became flat. And our model attributed this much of the catch, of the reported catch, to the Chinese water. And when we corrected by the catch of the other countries, we got that, about half. So we assessed that half of the catch of China was over-reported, and in fact it came from somewhere else, Africa, for example. The over-reporting was not really over-reporting, it was misallocated. It was actually African catch. And basically, this changed the trajectory of the fisheries of the world from up to down. So it changed the world statistics from going up to going down. It created a gigantic fuss. And it caused a big problem within FAO. It caused a big problem with the newspaper, the magazine called Economist. They criticized FAO. Everybody was criticizing everybody. And it caused FAO to, 2 years later, to separate the catch statistics that they had, that they produce and still produce, between the world and China. They now separate the Chinese statistics from all the other statistics because of that. So we just, yeah. So when we account for over and under-reporting by all countries, at the end of 15 years of work, we got this, and this came out recently. The world catch is about 50% higher than we think, but it is declining rapidly. And why is it declining? It's declining because we're fishing too much. And we're fishing too much, especially in Asia. The fleet development in Asia is tremendous. This is mainly China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. India is coming into the game. the fleet development is tremendous. And Europe is also growing, even though they tell us that they are decommissioning, this growth is also taking place. So we have too many boats. When you have too many boats in the water of your country, what always happens is that the fleet, if you are in this industrialized country, the fleet move abroad. And all big countries do that. And this was China in 1950. It fished in the Chinese water. This is China now. Now, this is not only China, this is France is fishing like that, Spain is fishing like that, the US also is fishing, not so much, but almost like that, and Russia is fishing like that. Oh, basically, from there to there. Now, and so they expand. They also expand in depth, but that I will not deal with this. And that is, all countries do that. Now, what I showed there was the distribution of catches. You can also express this as a distribution of the primary production used by fisheries. The primary production is the grass of the ocean, right? It's what is the biological matter that is produced by photosynthesis in the ocean. And in the coastlines, along the coastlines, there is lots of primary production and also lots of fishing. In offshore, there is not much primary production, but there is fishing also. And this primary production moves up the food web. It's phytoplankton, it moves up to zooplankton, it becomes small fish at trophic level 3, feeding level 3, and usually most fishing is around 4, because we catch tuna, cod, and meru, groupers, and that we like fish at about this level. So, one tuna is equivalent to 10 tons of prey fish, because the transfer efficiency from one level to the other is 10%. So, if you have 10 tons of prey fish, it's equivalent to 100 tons of zooplankton, equivalent to 1,000 tons of phytoplankton. So, the different fish that are caught at different trophic levels, 3.5, 4.1, 4.2, they can be expressed as phytoplankton. So we express everything as phytoplankton, and then I will show you a film. This is the first time I show it. It was done 3-4 days ago. So that was the phytoplankton use in 1950. Okay? Now sit tight. That's the growth of fishing over time. That's the expansion of fishing over time. That's my chance to get an Oscar. Oops. So you see how fishing developed. Almost done. That is now. We started on the coastline and we're fishing now. Now, it doesn't, the fishing, for example, in the tuna alley in the Pacific, you see this line that we catch so much tuna in. We don't catch the same tonnage as inshore, but relative to the primary production, we have as much influence on offshore than on the inshore, right? Because they are just a few tuna, and if we catch them, this is the same as catching a lot of fish inshore. So that's what we are. And I don't know if you know some how primary production is distributed, but this is about the distribution of primary production also. So basically, we cannot fish anywhere else. There is not much fish anywhere else. The result of all this fishing is fishing down. Basically, the size of all fish is reduced and the trophic level is reduced, and a reduction of biomass. Because the biomass is less in the water, a boat which operates 1 day or 1 hour catch less. So basically, because the boat continues to use fuel and a crew and stuff, this eliminates eliminates profit. So the fisheries in the high sea, for example, about half of them are working at a loss, and they have to be subsidized. The government, the French government is a big subsidizer, and the Chinese government is a big subsidizer. There are some fisheries that claim to have no subsidies, for example, Australia, but actually much of these subsidies are hidden. In France and China, they are more visible. And one consequence of the profit loss, or the fact that the fisheries don't make profit anymore, is the increase in slavery, because slavery reduced the cost of having a crew, and slavery at sea is getting to be a big problem. But I will not elaborate on that. And tomorrow we will see this fishing down process in China will be shown by Dr. Quillan. Now, the expansion in the finite ocean means that there is resource depletion, but it also means that there is increased competition between the different countries. And, for example, between China and the EU. China supplies lots of fish to the EU, but it also competes for fish with EU boats. For example, in the Pacific, Spain and China compete for tuna. I think that is the reason why a while ago the European Parliament, or the Committee on Fisheries, which the chair is a Spanish person closely connected to the fishery, asked for a study on the role of China in world fisheries. And they hired a consultant for the job, and they subcontracted me because they hadn't worked on China. So the report was written. We wrote a report for the European Parliament, and I have it here. And all the publications that I talk about here, you can have them. You don't have to photocopy anything. You just have them all here. And this report was reported on Chinese mining captive fisheries, and it reported on the catches, the fleet, the import of fishery products, but I'm not doing that, the export of fishery products, the activities of the Chinese fleet, and IUU fishing. And the first thing that we did was do a study that involved looking at newspaper, website in China and elsewhere, and studies to document the evidence of fishing that between 2000 and 2010, 2 periods of 5 years. And we found Chinese fleet operating legally or illegally in 93 countries. And the only place where we didn't find any report at the time were the Caribbean and the North Atlantic. But in the meantime, agreements have been signed with 1 or 2 countries, I think Cuba, that will enable Chinese vessels to operate in the Caribbean. So this is even a few years old, and it's not valid anymore. So Chinese vessels have been reported here. Here, for example, the fishing is illegal. But Chinese vessels have been caught repeatedly operating. They've been caught by the American Coast Guard in the northwestern Hawaiian Island. On the other hand, here, it's very complicated because there is some illegal fishing and lots of legal fishing, but people don't know. The people in the countries don't know this is legal because the agreement is not public. There is an agreement, the People's Republic of China makes an agreement with the president. And this agreement is almost private. I don't know what it is really. The agreement is not public, at least, and or the Minister of Fisheries. And so, if there is Chinese vessels, the journalists in the country will write, Chinese boats are there illegally. They are not. They are legally there, but the public doesn't know it. So, and we multiplied the number of vessels that we estimated from these studies for every country. We multiplied it with the catch density that we have for the type of vessels that occur in China, in a distant water fleet for China, and then we multiplied the number of boats with the catch, and we did a Monte Carlo study where you do lots of multiplication actually. And we got estimate of the number of vessels that were operating, the amount of catch, and the catch value in billions of euros. Now, these numbers underestimate our bottom-up estimation. The number of boats underestimate the numbers that are provided by China. We underestimated. But the catch doesn't overestimate, but the catch is higher than reported by the People's Republic of China. China reports 1 to 2 million tons caught annually abroad, and we had 4.5 million tons caught abroad. So, but of this fish that China catches abroad, about 1/3 is sold locally. For example, it's called Africa fish. They operate in Africa and sell the fish to Africa. That Africa fish is not sold in the international market. Then 1/3 is about 1/3 is sold in international markets on boats that are transferred in the high seas, the Chinese vessel and the reefer boat, and it goes to Las Palmas or other international places where it's mixed with fish from other nations and imported into Europe or America. 1/3, about 1.5 million tons to international market, and 1.5 million tons, about another third, come to China. And I think that's the part that comes to China is the part that is reported. So you would have 4.5 million tons caught abroad. 1/3 goes to the countries where it's caught, 1/3 international market, 1/3 is reported to China. I think that works out. The catch is mainly done in Africa, some in Asia, a little bit in Oceania. It's mainly tuna, and Central and South America, it's mainly squid and cephalopods. Very high value products. In Africa, it's not necessarily high value product, it's a large amount. So, China over-reports to FAO its domestic catch and under-reports its catch, its foreign catch. And yeah, I told you this part. And the fleet numbers are official numbers, about 300,000 motorized vessels. And what is interesting is that the fleet that is operating in Africa and elsewhere is very similar to the fleet that is operating in China itself. It appears that China is exporting its coastal fleet. It has not necessarily constructed a modern fleet of its for fishing abroad like Spain has or France has. Yeah. So there is lots of IUU fishing by China, especially in Africa. But IUU is a slippery term because FAO concludes that it's illegal, unreported, and undocumented. And in America, and in the head of many people, IUU is a version for illegal. IUU and illegal is almost the same. Actually, in the operation of China are sometimes illegal, but actually most of it is unreported. And much of it is, or some of it is legal, but people don't know that it is legal because it doesn't look good to say that you have an agreement to fish in this and that country. So there is a problem of transparency and limited capacity to collect information. These were the recommendation or the main finding. China is joining international agreement and it's getting better and better. And the key point to be reported here is that China has a tendency to agree to international agreement. If everybody agrees on something, China tends to agree, as opposed to Japan, which you can see them at the International Whaling Commission. The world is against them, and they don't budge. They don't change their opinion. It seems that China, as long as everybody does it, will go along with things that the world does. We've seen that with ivory, the pressure on China to not import ivory. China responded by not anymore importing ivory. I think it's beginning this year, right? And so China wants to be a player that can be used for fixing the operation of China's foreign fisheries. The problem probably is that the national government in China has decided that the foreign fleet are exploiting what they call the granary of China. The high seas are viewed as the granary of China, and everybody wants to fish in the high seas, and there will be increasing competition and conflict if they are not sorted out. And the last point here, the activities span the entire gamut, the entire span of IUU activity. That means they have unreported boats, they have undocumented boats, and then they have illegal fishing boats. The entire gamut. Now, we have examined agreements that China does. This is not in this presentation. In a paper that is called Euro versus Yuan for West Africa, we have looked at how China pays for access and compared the European Union with China's agreement. And China, as you know, builds ports, builds road, or builds things instead of paying money, cash. And this is very difficult to compare the two. But if you try to cost the ports and the roads and the airplanes and the things that, if you do that, you get approximately the same sum. At least no significant difference. We got 7% for Europe paying, 4% the value of the equipment that China builds in West Africa. But there is so much possibility of error that the difference is not significant. And African countries opt for China often because the political string are less tight. Yeah. So we published the result in a leading fisheries journal. Not only the report, but we published the result, and this was reviewed in Nature, and it was the recommendation that we did to the EU Parliament appeared to be still, what I can tell, they still appear to be valid. That FAO should insist on proper reporting of catch data. We promoted the creation, we suggested that a unit should be created that research China's ocean affairs, and that China, we suggested that the Chinese partners should be publishing the access agreement. Because the access agreement that Europe has with all countries, they are public. You can look at them, and the Chinese agreement are secret, confidential. The Japanese agreement also are confidential. Another problem is who owns this distant water fleet. It is very difficult to track them. Many of them are owned by companies in Cayman Island or somewhere in the Caribbean, and they are shell companies that are owned by shell companies, and it's very difficult to find the beneficial owners of Chinese fishing companies. In the long run, or it is the case now, that Interpol looks at illegal fishing, and it's not anymore a fisheries matter. It's a matter of criminal. Interpol look at it as a criminal activity and not as a fishery management issue. And well, that is a very difficult one. Basically, the Taiwanese, who have enormous fleet, are shut out of regional fisheries management organization by China, even though they have lots of knowledge about fisheries because they do it. And so that's a little problem. So that was the recommendation that we gave to the European Union. I have no recommendation to make to China because I was not asked to do that. But we did an atlas of world fisheries where every country had a page, and here's a page for China. And we mentioned in that page that we have a problem with statistics. In fact, 70 or 80% of the Chinese catch reported from the domestic water, this strange shape, is the Chinese catch. And you can see we could not fix it. It is increasing absurdly, and then the government said no more, and then it stopped there. And then later, somebody was sent to FAO, a Chinese statistician, and he reduced the catch. So this is supposed to be the Chinese catch. However, the Chinese domestic catch. However, the Chinese domestic catch is, as 80% is mixed fish. Mixed fish, you don't know what it is. And we, for our purpose, we use the catch of Taiwan and the catch of South Korea to infer what the species could be in China. And that is ridiculous. The statistics of China should be better than that for a big country like that. And and I stop here, and I thank you very much. We'll answer the question, obviously, if you have them. Yeah.
I think China and Japan are the two biggest nations that consume marine mammals. Like we eat all the shark fins from Africa, and Japanese catch all the tuna fish and whales from Australia water. What I suggest is, can we build a big fishery farm to grow fish, just like we build a chicken farm for chicken meat, the pig farm for pork, or the cattle farm for beef. Well, so we don't have to worry about it.
We do have to worry. I mentioned that a minute ago. Chicken eat fish meal. Pigs eat fish meal. Fish meal from West Africa, for example. Dutch pigs, the Dutch raise lots of pigs, are fed with fish meal. And fish meal is produced from herring and sardine that people can eat. What you propose is not a solution. Producing aquaculture of carnivore farming, farming, can I have this water? I eat a nut, and I should not eat nuts. So, farming, producing farmed fish, if you use fish to feed the fish, you will not have more fish, you will have less fish. So it's not simple. And if you want to eat marine mammal, you're free to do that, but you will be poisoned with heavy metals. And the people who, in Japan, who eat dolphins, they have mercury coming out of the ear. So they are poisoned with mercury. You don't want to eat marine mammals. And in Japan, they cannot eat, because, thank you, the young Japanese don't eat whales anymore. And the whales that Japan catch are put in storage in ice for the future. So the whaling by Japan is not a commercial venture. It's actually making a point about we can fish wherever we want. We can kill the whale wherever we want. It has nothing to do with feeding the Japanese. It's a political stand. Okay. Other questions? I can now speak again.
Diplomatic and security clashes between China and its neighbors in recent years. You started with the 2010 fishing boat collision incidents with Japan, which has really deteriorated or damaged Sino-Japanese relation. And then in the South China Sea, you have the 2012 Skarphol standoff caused by Philippine Navy's attempt to arrest Chinese fishermen. And then you have the 2014 Half Moon Shoal incident and with Philippines, and also the 981 oil rig incident with Vietnam, and 2016 Natuna fishing incident. This is some example pictures about the incidents in Southeast China Sea. And then this is the Skarphol and Natuna incident. This is the oil rig incident in 2014. You have dozens of fishing vessels from both sides encircling and ramping each other, resulting in the sinking of the Vietnamese fishing vessel. Against this backdrop, in this context, you have security expert or scholars warn that the clashes over fishing rights, fishery resources, poses the greatest potential risk for triggering a full-fledged crisis or even armed conflicts in the South China Sea. Thus, to prevent this kind of fishing incidents from reoccurring, a better understanding of the factors that make fishermen, particularly the Chinese fishermen, at the front line of the regional maritime dispute is thus critical. Many Western scholars and commentators has attributed this to a very simple narrative or factor. The Chinese government has been militarizing or politicizing its fishermen, and these fishermen are not fishermen actually, they are militia. They are the pawns of the PLA Navy, undertake or doing the dirty works for the government. Hence, you have numerous reports on this topic. Not only journal news articles, you have journal articles appearing covering the same issue or making the same statement. And then, very big concern is that you have U.S. Navy, the Pentagon, recently, just in last year, has published a report explicitly mentioned China's maritime militia as a security threat. And also the Japanese Defense White Paper made a similar statement. My view is that there's no denial the South China Sea claiming states, particularly Vietnam and China, has long considered fishermen important tools in asserting or defending their claims in the South China Sea. And maritime militia has been a long-standing policy of China and Vietnam. And in recent years, you see Philippines has made effort to establish their own version of maritime militia in the South China Sea. And in 2013, during President Xi Jinping's visit to Taiwan, he had met and praised Taiwan fishing militia's effort in defending China's claim of maritime interest in the South China Sea. And he said, the South China Sea islands has been China's territory since ancient times, and you, by referring to the fishermen, has been the leading force and vanguard in safeguarding China's maritime interest in the South China Sea. And since President Xi's visit, efforts from various coastal cities has been put to develop the maritime militia forces. Similarly, Vietnam has a very strong maritime militia force, and various support has been provided. And it has the so-called Militia and Self-Defense Force law, which was revised in 2009. However, this maritime militia or people's war narrative offers at least or at best partial explanation, and it has major weaknesses such as the maritime incident involving Chinese fishermen does not only occur in the disputed water in the South China Sea. In fact, if you look at the numbers and also the extent of violence, the most of the fishing incidents involving Chinese fishermen happened in the Yellow Sea with the Korean, and even look at South China Sea, it was Taiwan, and also even in in the disputed water in South China Sea and East China Sea, the occasion of incidents that happens are not always in the disputed areas. And also, this maritime militia narrative or people's war narrative, they overlooked the much complicated relationship between states, local government, and the fishermen. Here are just examples about the fishing incidents involving Chinese fishermen with Taiwan and with South Korea. You see the machine gun has been used to target China's fishermen in the South China Sea, in the Yellow Sea. And even in the case of the Philippines, with the Philippines in the South China Sea, the Chinese fishermen, they know they were fishing illegally, that's why they fly the Philippine flag, but the problem is that they fly the flag upside down. And also, a lot of all these narratives based on evidence that the Chinese government has been providing very substantial financial support in terms of fishing fuel subsidy to the fishermen. But if you look at the details of the fishing fuel subsidy policy, it has nothing to do with the ongoing, or has very little to do with the ongoing fishing maritime dispute with the neighbors. Hence, from my own view, I think it is important to situate the growing fishing incidents within the context of the development of regional fishery, particularly that of China. And behind the growing fishing incidents, I think there one key factor is that there are three major structure shifts that attribute to the green fishing incidents. The first is from inshore to offshore. The second is development of distant water fishing. And the third, and very importantly for the South China Sea and East China Sea dispute, is from traditional fishing to illegal harvesting of endangered species, including red coral, giant clams, sea turtles, etc. I will quickly go through it, but I think it has been well mentioned by Professor Pauling. So you have this structure shift from inshore to offshore. If you look at official statistics, the trend has been ongoing, but the problem is that since 2002, at the national level, the Chinese government stopped publishing the data, but at a local level, pointing to consistent structure shift from inshore to offshore, and also the development of marine fishery, the distant water marine fishery sector, distant water fishing. Of course, the data has been quite problematic, but if you look at the number of vessels, according to official data, it has reached 2,900 by 2016, and a few hundred more are under construction. This is some of the distant water fishing vessels I was trying to help. They unloaded the squid from Argentina. This is a very big transshipment ship. And the third structure shift is from traditional fishing to poaching of endangered species, in particular red coral in East China Sea and giant clams in South China Sea. The reason why red corals and giant clams have been quite popular in China in recent years, part of it is because of religious reasons. You see these very beautiful products made by red coral and very expensive ones. Also, it's a symbol of social status in Chinese culture, red coral products. What should be noted is that while red coral poaching is illegal in China, or sales is illegal in China, it has been is a very big industry in Taiwan. This is some of the pictures I took during my field research trip in Taiwan. And this one here in particular, on your right, it values at 2 million RMB. So you have reports that fishing vessels that harvest red coral for living can make up to 100 million a year. So this substantial financial profit has motivated many of the so-called fishermen from China, Taiwan, to engage in very dangerous behaviors. And also in the case of giant clams, similar trend. But this is mainly in the southern part of China, Tainan. These are some of the pictures I took during my trip to Tainan. Sea turtle. Hence, if you look at what really happened in 2012 and 2014 with Philippines, is that the Skarphol Incident started when the Philippine fishermen tried to arrest those fishermen who were actually harvesting giant clams in the Skarphol shore. And also in the half-moon shore incidents, the fishermen were arrested for the Philippine side said they were harvesting, but in fact, those fishermen were buying the sea turtles from the Filipino fishermen. There has this informal trade between China and regional fishermen in the South China Sea has been ongoing for many years, from giant clam to sea turtle and other marine products. With astonishing returns, large inflow of social capitals, and also government support, the Tainan fishermen has started building bigger and better ships, which are capable of going further or even farther in the South China Sea. Here, some of the ships you can see from Tainan's fishing port. But the problem is that it results in growing number of fishing incidents and also devastating impact on the marine ecology. And the structure shift of China's marine fishery sector are driven, I would say, at state level is by food security concerns, and on local and fisherman level is by economic factors. For China's, as far as China's fishing policy is concerned, I would say there are 5 primary objectives that the government wishes to pursue or intend to pursue. The first and most important is ensuring self-sufficiency of fishery products, and then you have the second one is generate incomes for the fishermen and earning foreign reserves, and third, you have the political and strategic importance of fishery, which has been discussed or demonstrated through previous slides in the earlier part. And of course, marine environment is also important. But in an ideal situation, these 5 objectives, with the right mix of policies, can be achieved at the same time. But in reality, the government faces the choice of which one to prioritize. And during different period, you have different, at least according to government policies, different priorities were set. While there are not a problem with China's official data, but what we can infer from the official data is the government's priority during different period. Professor Polly has mentioned during the early growth period, you have very serious over-reporting because the government considers expansion of marine production critical to the food security and basic economic well-being, well-being of its citizen. And then since late 1990s, government began to introduce this so-called zero negative growth policy until 2000. And then what happened between 2000 and 2015 is that you have China's fishery or marine fishery entered a new growth period. But this period only lasts for 5 years, and from my perspective. And then currently, China entered the second control zero negative growth period. Between the 11th or 12th 5-year plan, which is between 2001 to 2010, if you look at those 5-year plans, the government has explicitly put a reduction of fishery output as mandatory target. But this camp was removed during the 12th 5-year plan. So the reason why you have a second growth period between 2011 and 2015, for me, I think is because the convergence of interest among different actors and fisheries and marine fishery has been considered by the government as of strategic importance for food security reasons, for economic reasons, for geopolitical reasons, and for political reasons. And the first and the most important one is the food security reason. It all started with the global food crisis in 2007 and 2008, which triggered or prompted the discussion or eventually adoption of the so-called blue granary strategy. Also, the problem associated with aquaculture. Simply has been mentioned by Professor Polly. China's rapid expansion of China's aquaculture sector has put heavy pressures on the marine fishery sector through fish feed, pollution, etc. And also because of the rising concerns, safety concerns of fishery products, particularly farmed fishery products, the consumer, especially the wealthy ones, are willing to pay higher price for the wild marine catch, which provides strong incentives for the fishermen to build bigger and better ships. This is the picture I took during my visit to Fujian. Those smaller fish are for feed in local fish farms. And according to the Greenpeace report last year, the aquaculture's reliance on trash fish has been very astonishing, actually. Here are just some of the numbers. We will not read it. Here are some of the so-called small fish targeted. And then in 2000, it has been going on for years because the concerns about the safety aspect of the red meat. The government has been promoting encouraging the consumers to consume more fish products. While the central government are more concerned about food safety aspect, local government are more worried about economic impact and also local employment. Apart from direct employment, you have the shipbuilding sector that rely on after its recession in early 2011. Many see fish building sector, fishing vessel building sector, a solution to the overcapacity of China's shipbuilding sector. And also, you have China has the largest ship processing industry, which is underutilized because of lack of input. It put on pressures for the marine industry, the marine fish industry as well. And then you have the Marine Silk Road, Belt and Road Initiative. Marine Fishery Cooperation has been one of the key areas. Just now I mentioned about the link between shipbuilding sector with the marine fishery industry. In fact, in 2012, what happened is that 27 academics from Chinese Academy of Engineering, they submitted a proposal to the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture, which then resubmitted this proposal to the State Council, advocating to make marine fishery a strategic sector. One part of the reason is they argue is because this can be a solution to China can utilize the excess capacity in China's fishing industry back then. And then this proposal was adopted, and in February 2013, the State Council held its first meeting on marine fishery, and then very quickly issued the first ever advice on promoting sustainable and healthy marine fishery development. This is the first ever document issued by the State Council on Marine Fishery. It has spelled detailed principles and policy support for the entire marine fishery sector. And then what is interesting is that if you look at the statement, this document, it clearly states that China should control inshore fishing, expand offshore fishing, and develop distant water fishing. And during this period, huge amount of financial support has been provided to marine fishery sectors. Here are just some examples about all the financial support provided by the Chinese government to the marine fishery sector. This is the fishing fuel subsidy for fishing in the South China Sea in the Spratleys. Hence, within a few years, you have this remarkable transformation of the fishing marine fishery sector in many parts of China, from traditional to modern big vessels. With bigger and better vessels, more and more Chinese fishermen now can go further into the seas, not only in disputed waters, but in other country seas and also high seas. And the second period, however, the problem is that the second expansion period ended quickly because the central government became aware of the environmental, social, and even political cost associated with China's marine fishing industry. For instance, in the 2016 the arbitration award on the South China Sea dispute, the arbitration award clearly mentioned the Chinese fishermen's very damaging behavior in the South China Sea, in the Spratleys, harvesting giant clams, sea turtles, etc., which has damaged China's international reputation and image. Hence, since 2016, I would say entered the second control period. One part of the reason is that under Chinese President Xi Jinping's leadership, ecological civilization has become a guiding principle, development principle for China. And Xi Jinping conceptualized EC as green mountains and waters are good, silver mountains. And so it says that protecting the marine environment are as important, protecting the environment and nature resources in general are as important as economic development. And then a few months ago, China has set up this new ministry to protect the sustainable development of its natural resources. And then just 2 days ago, on the 47th World Environment Day, Xi Jinping, this article has been widely circulated in Chinese state media and also social media. To Xi Jinping, environmental protection is a fundamental principle. Hence, you see a lot of effort has been taken by the Chinese government to address various problems associated with marine fishery. They started with IUU fishing effort taken by Chinese government on IUU fishing, which actually predates 2016. But in any case, and also a serious effort to crack down the giant clam business in Taimen. The whole industry was closed overnight since earlier last year. But the problem is that the so-called black market is still flourishing because of huge demand. And then you have various policies to reduce, to put a cap on marine catch production, a number of fishing fleet, and also, very importantly, China has decided to cut the notorious fishing fuel subsidy. By 2019, the amount of fishing fuel subsidy to the fishermen will be reduced to 40% level of that in 2014. And then on the distant water fishing sector as well, in December last year, according to the 13th five-year plan, the government will will restrict the number of distant water fishing to 3,000, and also the number of distant water fishing companies. And also, the policies was introduced to address problems associated with agriculture. The domestic expansion of agriculture will be controlled, and China has made it a priority to develop the mariculture or distant sea farming. And what is, for me, is even more fundamental is that the Chinese government has ditched the principle of self-sufficiency in fishery products, which is in line with the overall paradigm shift in the country's food security strategy. And increasingly, you see Chinese government has been reducing the tariffs on fishery products import, and also signing fishery trade deals with a number of countries such as Norway, Jamaica, Maldives, and Indonesia. And it encourages its companies to, Professor Polly has mentioned in the past, 1/3 of the distant water catch sold locally and 1/3 to developed countries, a certain market. And then, but now, has been going on for years, the Chinese government has encouraging its distant water fishing companies to bring back their catch to meet the rising demand for domestic market. However, the problem is that how effective this policy will be, or this effort will remain to be seen due to various challenges. The first is the demand side challenge. And also you have the supply side. Too many fishing vessels. Regarding the demand side, the typical example is giant clam and red coral business. Because when you have rising demand for these products, your action taken to deal with the supply side will only get the price even higher. Higher price will motivate more fishermen to go further, and also trade or purchase from other countries as a case of, because when the Chinese government take action against red coral business, a lot of Chinese consumers they went to Taiwan to buy the red coral products. And also in the case of giant clam, the moment when the Chinese government started to crack down on Taiwan's giant clam business, you see reports saying giant clam was smuggled from Vietnam to China via land borders. And also with the blue granary strategy, the mariculture, the feed is still a big challenge. With rising demand, I think, and at least according to some estimate, may be different from other sources, but it is projected that the Chinese total demand for fishery product will continue to grow, and this rising demand will be, in the future, will be made mainly through import. This will have far-reaching consequences on the global fishery trade and fishery production, but from a different perspective. Thank you very much.
Presentation is the key features of the EU common fisheries policy, but as we are far from the European Union, from Europe here, I think that it could be useful to make a few words, to have a few words about the European Union itself, about this strange political structure which is unique in the world, and I will start with that, and after I will talk about the common fisheries policy. So, what is the EU? The EU is an intergovernmental organization which was created 60 years ago in 1958. At that time it was a European Economic Community, and there have been a few treaties in the meantime, up to 13 years ago, 2004, and it has become the European Union. And this change in the name of this structure shows a closer integration between the member states. At the origin, there were only 6 member states, and now there are 28 member states. In 1 year ahead, there will be only 27, because as probably many of you know, the UK will leave the EU. In this structure, there are 3 main institutions: the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission. The Council is a generic term which identifies a body which is composed of the ministers in charge of a specific policy. For instance, you have the Council for Trade, the Council for Transport, and also the Council for Fisheries, which is, by the way, the Council for Agriculture and Fisheries. And the Council is a co-legislator with the European Parliament. And the Commission, where I was a legal officer before, is the executive body of this structure, the European Union. And how is it organized internally? According to the treaties, there are 3 kinds of competencies. The fields of exclusive competencies. For instance, what is the most known in the world, I think, is that the EU is a customs union. Once a product is imported and is released in a country is one of the countries of the European Union, it's released for free circulation in the whole territory of the European Union. Also, external trade is an issue of external competencies, and the management of fisheries resources is also an issue of exclusive competence. You have also the areas of shared competencies, for instance, environment, social policy, transport, and in these areas, the EU, for any subject, takes action when it's considered that the action would be better achieved at the EU level than at member states level. It's what we call the principle of subsidiarity. And in this way, many issues which are of shared competencies fall within the competencies of the EU now, in particular for the issues of transport and environment. And for these issues, once the EU has taken any action, any legislative action, from that time the member states are not allowed to act about them. Their role is to apply the EU rules and then to take implementing measures. And the third kind of competence applies for the areas where the EU intervenes support of the actions of the member states, for instance, research and education and training, and so on. So, as I said, the EU is the fisheries is an EU exclusive competence. Why that? So the EU was created in 1958. At that time, a common policy for fisheries was not necessary, because at that time the concept of economic exclusive zone didn't exist. It was totally unknown. And the member states were only 6, situated all on the continental Europe. And there was generally no overlap between the activities of the fishing sectors, except at the border, and in that case there were bilateral arrangements, and also as there was no exclusive economic zone, very often from 3 nautical miles of the coast, or 6 nautical miles, we were already in the high seas. And the situation changed in the 70s. I will show you a map here. Perhaps I will come. You are Spain here, France here, and I come from here. Northeast here. So France is here. And we not see the new policy about the North Sea before. Yes. And the situation changed in the 70s. So in the 70s, first of all, 4 states applied to become member of the European Union. So Ireland, which is here, the UK here, Denmark, and Norway. So Norway applied, but didn't enter the European Union. There was a referendum, and Norway rejected the adhesion. People of Norway. And as you see, so in particular with Ireland and the UK, so these 2 countries are not on continental Europe, and fishermen from France, the Netherlands, and from Germany also were fishing very often on the UK and Ireland coast. And it's also at the beginning of the 70s that happened these big changes in the law of the sea, because it was in 1970 exactly that it was decided at the United Nations to convene the 3rd conference on the law of the sea, and which resulted with the Convention of the Law of the Sea in 1982. But in 1975 was agreed the principle of the institution of economic exclusive zone. And all these areas became exclusive economic zone from the country member of the European Union. And during that time, during that period, there were discussions for the adhesion of the UK and Ireland to Denmark. And the Treaty of Adhesion was ratified in 1972, and these 3 countries entered in the European Union in 1973. And in 1977, there was a concerted action of all the member states to establish economic exclusive zones along the coast of all the member states. That was just 1 year after the agreement at the circumference of the law of the sea. And so why it was decided, so it was at that time during the negotiation of the treaty that it was decided to establish a common fisheries policy and to establish it as exclusive competence of the EU. And why it was done so, as we know, so it's not possible to keep fish within borders. They don't know borders. And in these seas, the same stock could occur in 2, 3, 4, even more countries. For instance, if you have the stock in the North Sea here, it could occur in waters of the UK, of Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and the north of France. And it was also a question of pragmatism, but from a legal point of view, it was even an obligation, as you have Article 63, paragraph 1 of the Convention of the Law of the Sea, of UNCLOS, which requires that members of the United Nations to coordinate through regional organizations, and these regional organizations are known as the Regional Fisheries Management Organizations, or RFMOs. So with the EU, the existence of the EU, there was no need to create a specific RFMO. The EU framework fits very well for this task of management of the fisheries resource. It's exclusive competence. And but it was hard to establish how to frame this exclusive competence, because the core issue was, of course, the distribution of the fisheries resources between the states. And it took 10 years to have an agreement among the member states. At the beginning, it was required to do it within 6 years, but it was not possible. It took them 10 years, and it was at the end. It was agreed to make the distribution of catches, for making the distribution of catches, to refer to the catches made from 1973 to 1978. So you can imagine how hard it was difficult, because as everybody knows, statistics is not something very precise. Even now, it's very difficult to know the level of catches. So 40 years ago, it was really a challenge, in particular as it was the period. The period of reference was from 73 to 78. From 73 to 77, there was no exclusive economic zone. It was the high seas, so it was really very difficult to know what was fished there. Something perhaps interesting know, you see these lines here. It's what we call the ICES areas. ICES is the International Convention for the Exploration of the Sea. It's an intergovernmental organization which was created in 1902, so which is it's a very old intergovernmental organization, and this line do not reflect at all the borders between the countries. It's the areas which have been created by the scientists of the ICES. And then the gauges are, so we refer to gauges by each area. And it works like that. For each stock, for each area, there is a total allowable catch which is defined and which is distributed between member states. At the beginning, for the first time, there is a total allowable catch which is defined. There is a key of allocation which is established. And for the stocks for which a key of allocation has been established at the beginning, which was in 1983, so the key of, that means 35 years now, the key of allocation has not changed, even if the stocks are not the same, but you can imagine if we change the key of allocation for one stock, some states will ask for changing the key of allocation for another stock, and so on and so on. All the framework would not collapse, but it would be very difficult to keep it. These keys of allocation are still the same, and the system works like that. So each year there is a total allowable catch which is defined for each species, and it's after that this specific total allowable catch for the year, it's allocated among the member states according to this key of allocation. And after this allocation, each member state allocates the relevant quotas to its fishermen. Among the other rules of the Common Fisheries Policy, we are included, for instance, rules on the establishment of multi-annual management plans for the management of stocks, and for these stocks are applied now the precautionary approach and the ecosystem approach, and the rules. These rules are based also on some scientific advice. You have rules on, which have established a system of licenses, and also for the management of the capacity of the fishing fleet for each member state. And so these rules are very important because, as we know, the efficiency of the vessels is improving all along the years, so from year to year. And consequently, the member states must usually reduce the global capacity of their fleets this is laid down in specific rules. We have rules also on the technical characteristic of the gear. So these rules, of course, depend on the area where the gear are used, where the vessels are fishing, and also there are many provisions for control and enforcement. For instance, all the vessels over 12 meters now must have satellite, how is it called? VMS, a vessel monitoring system, and they must transmit their position to a fisheries monitoring center in each state. And the Commission, as executive body, control whether the member states really control their fleets. For all these issues, including for control and enforcement, as it's exclusive competence, the member state has the obligation to put into application all the rules which are adopted at EU level. And it's even the case when member states impose sanctions. Of course, when a member state imposes sanctions, it's according to national law, because there is no penal system at EU level. But it's done in accordance with the EU framework, because this one provides that the member states are obliged to pronounce, and I quote, effective, proportionate, and dissuasive penalties. And if a member state doesn't comply with that, the European Commission can even refer the case before the Court of Justice of the EU, and even ask the court to impose a financial sanction to the member state. And that has already happened. And this exclusive competence applies also to the external relations of the EU. For when a vessel of a member state go fishing in a third country, in waters of a third country, through a bilateral agreement, it's the EU which negotiates this bilateral agreement. In the regional fisheries management organizations, it's the EU which negotiate. The EU is members of many regional, many RFMOs. Member states sometimes are members of these RFMOs. It's because some territories are not part of the EU territory. For instance, in the Pacific, France is member of the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission. So this RFMO which manages the tuna Pacific, France is member on behalf of French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna. And for fisheries, it's also the EU which negotiates at international level, at the UN, for instance, for the preparation of the annual resolution on fisheries, or at the FAO for international agreements, or other such bodies. And internally it works with coordination, of course, between the Commission as executive body of the EU and the member states, because the position which is expressed by the EU is done through agreement with all the member states. Thank you very much.
Session number 2, with one presentation about the development of the Chinese maritime transport in the context of the 21st century maritime Silk Road. The presenter is Professor Wang Liahui from East China Normal Universities in Shanghai.
Thank you very much. It's my honor. Yeah, it's my honor to present. And my topic is the development of Chinese maritime transport in context of the 21st century maritime Silk Route. I'm from East China Normal University in Shanghai. And we know that in 2013, the Belt and Road is promoted by the President Xi. And we know that the Belt and Road is referred to the Silk Road economic belt and the 21st century maritime Silk Route. The Belt Route is aimed to build economic patterns with countries along it. We know that it's a big topic, and many researchers to do the studies. In this year, we published a paper about the maritime network from 1997 to 2016. But in this presentation, we focus two questions. One is what are the main changes since the establishment of this initiative in Chinese sector of maritime transport. The next question is, will the changes created a new change for sea sustainability? So, because it's a big topic, so we focus on the trend of this fact. We found that there are 5 models of integration about transport. One is the integration of ports. We can say that this is all coast ports, and in 2015, Ningbo, Zhoushan, and other 5 ports in Zhejiang province combined Zhejiang Port Group. It's a big port group. And at the same time, Guangxi province promoted the reform of ports integration. We can say that here are some ports, they want to combine into one port group. And in 2017, Nanjing, Liangang, Suzhou, and other ports in Jiangsu province combined into Jiangsu Port Group. And also, Dalian, Jingzhou, and Yingkou ports combined into one port group, Liaoning Port Group. So, we can say Fujian province and Shandong province also want to promote different ports combined in one port group. So we can see that there are many ports want to integration in one port group. As the port management system, we can see that before 1988, all the important ports were managed by Department of Transport directly. So they were controlled by the central government. But from 1988 to 2001, all the important ports were managed by the central government and the local governments. Port business management mainly controlled by the central government, but the personnel was decided by local government mainly. From 2001, it's an important year that ports were managed by local government, which reformed to separated government administration and enterprise management. But we also can say that after 2002, Shanghai Port invested in the ports along Yangtze River, but it was not successful. After 2015, support integration was pushed by the provincial government and supported by the central government. We know that as the law of ports in 2004, a city only have a port, one port, but now a provinces have one port group. So we can say that many ports in one provinces will combined in one port group. And another integration of about port and shipping companies. The port companies and shipping companies build close cooperation through the establishment of capital link and further improve the international competitiveness in MSR. We can see that in 2007, COSCO hold 20% share of Qingdao port, and then China Missions Group controlled Liaoning Port Group, and in the same year, COSCO hold 15-hold SIPG and become its third largest shareholder. And also in 2017, COSCO, SIPG, and Jiangsu Port Group cooperated. And in this year, China Missions Group cooperated with Tianjin Port. So we can say that port companies want to build cooperation with shipping companies. And also we can say the third integration of shipping companies. And there are 5 central companies in the shipping sector under the central government. We can say there are 5 companies before 2008, but after the crisis in 2008, CSC and this company combined in one big company. Now we can say that in 2015, this company was cooperate with China Missions Group, and in the same year, COSCO and the China Shipping Group combined with COSCO Shipping. So, COSCO Shipping becomes the 4th largest container shipping company in the world. And we did some research about the two shipping companies' maritime network. In 2015, we can say that China Shipping has a relative advantage in Mediterranean Sea, Middle East, and Northwest Europe. And in the same year, COSCO has a relatively strong advantage in North American, Australia, and New Zealand. But after the cooperation in 2016, COSCO Shipping has most extensive coverage in the Mediterranean and East Asia. Also, they get very closely in the Europe. So we can say that in this year, they want to build more and more important port. They want to build close relationship with China. And another integration of sea rail. We also can see that COSCO Shipping is a very important actor in the project. They want to build a sea rail relationship in this year, based on Paris. And in January 2017, the first and the second trains carrying Chinese containers launched by COSCO Shipping Group arrived in Budapest by the port of Paris. Greece makes the opening of the China-Europe Land Sea Express route connecting China with Central and Eastern Europe. And as we know that the model of the evolution of ports, which are right by notable, during the regionalization, the railway or highway is very important to get the hinterland. So we can say that during this port development, they built a railway, connect this port and some capitals at the end of the Budapest. And another integration of port city. We just now said that China Machines Group is a very important actor. So they want to build a model of a port-packed city in the foreign port. Their project is that ahead port, they want to build a port or cruise port. And in the middle part, they want to build economic or business park to develop the supporting industries, business and other industries. And behind the port, there is a city. They want to develop the living or commercial or other supporting industry. We see that the China Machine Group built some ports along this Silk Road. Beside this port, China Machines Group hope to copy Skarphol experience. Skarphol in Shenzhen, they developed the Skarphol district very successfully. So they want to copy Skarphol's experience in this port based on port-packed city model. There are two pictures. In this picture, it's a new model deep water port. They want to build a new port in the suburban. The business of old ports will be linked by the new one. This will not only completely solve the connection between old port and the center of city, but also adopted the trend of large-scale shipping. And in the old port area will be used for urban development, including commercial office, hotel, or other facilities, and so on. It will create a new commercial center in the port. So we can say there are 5 models of integration behind the project of Silk Road. There is a brief conclusions. The Belt and Road will have a significant impact on the development of Chinese ports. In terms of scale and management, there is a gap between domestic and foreign ports. So the Chinese ports have pressure. Therefore, the integration of ports, integration of shipping companies, integration of shipping will help to improve the port's competitiveness. And in the foreign countries, the income of the pure invested in port is limited. So the companies also know that it was not feasibility. The integration of sea rail can expand the hinterland. The integration of port and the city will promote the sustainability development of the park and the city behind the port. So we can conclude that some main ports and the shipping companies want to build the big port. This means that the port extends from the functional of shipping to develop the comprehensive services. And another is big logistics, takes the ports as the center and extends the expansion of the port's regional hinterland by use the railway or highway. And another is a big platform. Port is developed first, and then they will build industrial park behind the port, and also supporting the development of a new urban areas. So we can see that there is a trend of
color about the adult blue is also come from the University of Vancouver. And actually that the first one is I think everyone, maybe almost everyone have think about cruise. Actually the cruise, when you see about the picture, you can see they are the floating hotel. Actually they have some of the bars, theater, casinos, dancing rooms. Actually it's a floating hotel with it at the high sea. And so that the cruise is nowadays is a very popular tourism product, and it is to go to different itineraries. And so that when we see about some of the key definitions about the cruise, the first key definition is about the transportation of pleasure-seeking travelers on ocean voyage, offering one or more experiencing about the port of course. And so that the cruise can attract many cruise is based on your port's facilities, how any shore excursion is very exciting, is very attractive. When ports is very exciting, actually that it can attract more bigger cruise vessels into their ports, and also bring about the cruise passengers there. And also, cruise is defined as any fare-paying voyage for leisure on board a vessel whose primary purpose is the accommodation of guests and not flight normally to visit a variety of destinations rather than to operate on a set of routes. So the cruise is also set of the passenger transport. It's unlike about the ferry. Ferry is about daily operations, have the fixed routing, fixed schedule. But the cruise is not fixed schedule, not fixed routing. It's based on the what about the cruiser, what they want and expectations. And so that when we see about the cruise market, basically the cruise market is currently divided in three main regions: Asia, Europe, and North America. And in the traditionally, and Europe is the earliest of the cruise market, and North America and Asia. Asia is start from 2000, and nowadays the Asia has already become as an expanding market, has already changed about the story. And because when you see about the picture, demand for the cruise from different regions, you can see that the China has already generated about 2.1 million of the cruise passengers. In the 2020, China will be attract about the 100 million passengers as well of the outbound tourists. And so that the China is a very potential market there. And the top 10 scheduled ports caused by the port in 2017, you can see that Shanghai is a very key port in China as well. And the second ranking is about South Korea. And about the cruise line deployments by the region, actually China is about in the middle ranking, and I believe that in the forthcoming years will become of the top 3 as well. And what is about the cruise tourism? Actually, cruise tourism is a socio-economic system generated by the interactions between human organizations and geographical entities aimed at producing about the maritime transportation and able about the leisure experience. So that the cruise tourism is about kind of the tourism product is generated by the cruise ship industry. And so that cruise tourism is relies heavily on the increasing level of the cruise participations of the customer from the different age group, background, and the regions. So that's why, as I said, that when your cruise port is very attractive, you can attract about the cruise liners and also the cruise passenger. In the final outcome is that it can generate about the national competitiveness and also their GDP from the cruise tourism. When you say that this is the model about the cruise tourism, how to generate about the total revenue for the whole aspect. The first one is you can see that for the cruise, there are some of the crew member and passengers on that. They will spending on the shore excursion So that's why it's generally about different cluster, different about the cruise related tourism. And the second one is income from the fees from other surveys that the ship was ordered by different parties in and out as that. And the third one is income from the fees for the repair and maintenance. So the ship repair and maintenance shipbuilding industry is very popular for building about the cruise. And last one is income from the fees for the surveys for the boats recognized at the port where the boat stopped in. And so that is some of the harbor fees and also some of the canal fees as that. And so that in Asia, China actually that is experiencing about the significant growth. Because that is the favorable geographical positions, you can see that there are the 4 main cruise ports in China, and Sanya and Shanghai, Xiamen is very important, and that is a favorable geographical position. They have a long coastline as that, and it can link up with the neighboring regions. Second one, they have the unique about charm of some of the Eastern cultures as that. And because Western travelers, they think that the Eastern culture is a very unexpected and very surprising as that, so that they will explore about these new places, geographical regions. And also the tourism resources is very rich, especially for the Professor Wang is mentioned that after the One Belt, One Road, actually that it is very rich about the tourism resources. And the last one is the high potential of the tourism market, because some of the places is still undeveloped. And so that after the development about One Belt, One Road is very good. And also in China, there is the growing middle class group and growth of the potential of the outbound travel. It tends to boost up about the number of the cruise passengers there. So that in the CEO of the World Caribbean Cruise Limited said that we see Asia in general, China in particular as a strategic objective. So that China, without China, we can say that the cruise market in Asia is very dangerous as that. And so that after entering about the WTO World Trade Organization in 2001, more and more cruise companies will build their wholly owned branches and establish different about regional and local operating office. Because establishing about their office from the cruise liner is very important, because it can set up about the marketing strategies, about the different investment strategies. And choose China as their port of course or home ports. Nowadays, there are around about 12 or 15 ports, of course, main ports in the eastern China and the southern China, and then the last one is the northern China. And not about the cruise port capacity and new cruise facilities is the main objectives for the China in their 5-year plan. Cruise ships are increasing in size, have evolved from the bigger to jumbo, and so that building about the large cruise ship is an affordable issue. And China will be the world's 4th largest international tourism market, and nearly 100 million outbound travels by 2020, so that it is a very big market as that. And nowadays there are more than 20 ocean ports in China targeting about the cruise tourism. So that the cruise tourism is one of the, I can say, is innovative port and also economic pillars for the economic development in China. And no matter what, actually I have reviewed about some of the literature reviews for about the cruise ship, and actually that they think that the China cruise tourism face about the main difficulties is, the first one is they do not know who are the Chinese cruisers. So the segmentation is a problem about that. They do not know what are the appropriate product or right product can be adapted to the different Chinese cruisers, because there is very limited information has been deposited on customer cruising from coastal cities of China. So the main problems nowadays, some of the ports of course is very few. It's under capacity issue. Finding the cruise passenger is quite difficult for in China in some of the ports. And so that the second part is about what are the degree of emphasis on all 3 C sustainability dimensions. When we speak about the C sustainability, we need to think about economic, social, and also the environmental is very important. If that is the 3 main aspect is go to a maximum level, we can is all one pessimist as that. And so that we would to analyze about whether the cruise ship industry in China, whether they can achieve about this 3 main aspect. And actually, when you see about the 3,000 about the cruise ship size per day, they will generate about actually is a large amount of the pollutants. And so that this is the real figure about that come from the one scholar as far about that. If you think about, you can check about this research report. Actually, that in the 3,000 passenger ships, it generates about the solid waste, domestic sewage, and also some of the toxic chemicals as that. And so that you can see that cruise is like about small moving city to move it into the high sea, and it can generate about the harm effect. And what are the challenge of the sea sustainability? Actually, that Shanghai also has the solar power request for the cruise ship and ports to do there. And also Sanya has also started to develop an environmental city with green tourism concept. However, there is some very big challenges to still in the introductory stage, because the first one is there is a lack of public awareness. They think that the green tourism is a very new concept. What are the importance? What are the economic value? Second one is the cruise liner and cruise port think that they are the high capital investment. There is a lack of human capital and supporting industry to support about the green tourism. And the fourth one is about the statistical data is very limited, so that they are very limited to do some of the statistical model to calculate about some of the data analysis, how to prevent, how to reduce about the environmental issues. And also the quality of people is also a challenge. It's about education and training is still a big issue about that. And the government has not any air pollutants management system, and rules and regulations are easily established. So that many cruise ports in China still do not have a very mature, and so different places have the different rules and regulations. And so the conclusion is that, and in China they have the three main phases of the cruise ship industry development. Before 2008 is the early growth stage, and the 2008 to 2016 is the expanding stage, and after 2016 is about the maturity stage. And so that China cruise market is going to the maturity stage. So what are and also the limitations of information and knowledge to understand about the Chinese cruise behavior is the main problem about the cruise ship industry. So that there is the gap for the service quality about the expectations between the cruise liner and also the cruise passengers. And so that nowadays the foreign invest about to the cruise industry is a quite risky business in China, is a main problem about that. And also when I see that go back to the sea sustainability, the conclusion is I think it is actually that is go to the only focus the investment aspect is about the economy. And so that the China cruise ship in the sea sustainability is only go to the economist, and so and environmental is still as a minimal impact about that. And sea sustainability actually poses a challenge to cruise ship in China. And Chinese government actually from now on is play a minimal role and effort. They cannot provide some of the how to maintain about good subsidiary or the tax rebate for the cruise liners and ports. And so that it is difficult to motivate about the parties or stakeholders to support about the green tourism. And far below international standard of environmental protections, the problem is we have the climate change for the sea, and also the marine ecosystem and food supply chain is a problem for the under the cruise ship pollutants as that. And so that this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.